So again, thank you for joining. I've been with Save the Sound for 11 years now. I love what I do, and I really enjoy the beach grading, the process of grading our beaches. I love getting out on the water, as I'm sure many of you do, and into it. So it's fun to take a look and aggregate data and issue these grades. So I really do appreciate everyone joining. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the most recent release of our beach grades. I'm going to give a quick public announcement on who we are meaning Save the Sound. Then we're going to jump right into what is behind the beach grades. Some of you, hopefully many of you are familiar with, their A to F, green to red, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what goes into those grades, the data and how we evaluate them. And then I have a section on regional results. We're going to take a little tour around Long Island Sound. Maybe one of your favorite beaches will show up. And I think at the end, we also will leave a little bit of time for me to take any beaches that people want to take a closer look at. I'd be more than happy to, zoom in on them and show grades and kind of help interpret, what we have for any particular beaches. So hang tight. Here we go. Save the Sound. So like I said, I've been at Save the Sound for 11 years. I love what I do. I really enjoy working with the colleagues, many of who some of you probably know. We have a bunch on this call too. It's a great organization. Our mission is to protect, improve, and understand the land, air, and water of the Long Island Sound region. We use legal and scientific expertise, bring people together to achieve results that benefit our environment for current and future generations. And I can tell you, growing up on Long Island Sound, this is a great place for me. I really enjoy working with my colleagues here, lots of friends, but the mission is so important. And I really love that, for me at least, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. If I'm really kidding, I don't know if I actually work 9 to 5, but a few extra hours here and there. But I actually get to work on Long Island Sound water quality all the time, and I get to live it, which is awesome. And we are going to be talking about, like I said, one of the fun things that we do. It's a data aggregation project where we issue beach grades, and it's specific to how healthy the waters are for people to swim in them. We also issue a Long Island Sound report card, which some of you might be familiar with. That comes out every other year, and it specifically looks at how healthy are the waters for supporting the aquatic life that we want to see, the healthy habitats that we all want to have around Long Island Sound. That's the Long Island Sound report card. Not talking about that much today, other than right now. But it will be coming out. The next version of it will be coming out in September. So definitely keep your eyes out for that. We'll have the Long Island Sound report card grading the open waters of Long Island Sound and many, many bays and harbors around the margins. Today, though, we're talking about beach grades. We issue a Long Island Sound beach report, but it does come out every other year. So when we're doing the Long Island Sound report card, I just mentioned that's coming out in September. We don't issue the full beach report, which is a full digital PDF in print report on Long Island Sound beaches, but we still do release beach grades. So this is a year where we're releasing the beach grades. So for people to go and see them, they'll need to go to soundhealthexplorer.org and the swimmable section, which is what we're looking at now. Click on this, happy swimmer in Long Island Sound, and you'll get taken to this page. These are the most recent Long Island Sound beach grades, looking at how healthy are the waters for us to swim in them. And if you have really good eyesight, or if you get really close, you'll probably notice we're looking at 2025. The beach grades are always going to be 1 year ahead of the swimming season. For obvious reasons, we can't issue 2026 beach grades because the season just started, and you're going to understand that more when I show the data that fuel these grades. But the beach grades are very much a historic look and look back at how healthy the waters have been for us to swim in them. And you can see on the bottom of this image, there's a slider. So it's not interactive right now, but if I wanted to look at 2024, 2012, all the way back to 2003 for many of our beaches, I could. And I could compare how the grades have done year to year, all the way up to 2025. Also in that slider, you can see the precipitation. I'll be talking a little bit more about precipitation shortly, but the average precipitation for that particular recreation season, which does have a pretty big impact on the grades at times. So here are the grades. I think it's pretty obvious. Dark green is good, all the way to a red being an F. And as you can see, and as I'm about to also let you all know, Long Island Sound does pretty well. There's lots of green on this map, fortunately. So the data behind the beach grades. Save the Sound has really robust water quality monitoring projects where our staff and trained volunteer community scientists are out on the water collecting samples. We also work with subawards and subcontractors as part some of our projects to collect water quality data. But those data are not fueling the beach grades at all. The Long Island Sound beach grades that we issue involve and incorporate local health department sampling. So our health departments are out at our public beaches, at our private beaches too, collecting samples. This is a health department staffer in Westchester. Obviously, that's not a beach. That's Beaver Swamp Brook. If you're familiar with Westchester, goes down towards Harbor Island Park, where there is a public beach. But these health department staff and their interns and their, staff are out collecting samples, filling bottles, just like we're seeing here, kicking a little bit out of the bottle. That keeps lab staff happy if you're familiar with this work. And those bottles get processed at a lab. Specifically, they're processed for pathogen indicator bacteria. And just to drive that home, I was talking a lot about Westchester here, but say you're joining from Connecticut. In Connecticut, it tends to be local, more local health departments like the town of Greenwich Health Department or the town of Fairfield Health Department, New London. Some other portions of Connecticut have these health districts that represent numerous municipalities. You might be in an area that has a health district that collects the samples. In Westchester, Suffolk, and Nassau, it's the county health department that is out there filling these bottles and doing the work. And then in New York City, it's the New York City Department of Health. So those are the people out collecting these data. And we are able to obtain them through the Federal Water Quality Exchange. So they go through this process of going to their state Department of Health after the local, and then into a federal database where unless you know what you're looking for, they could be pretty hard to retrieve. So that's part of what we do is we're able to retrieve all those data and combine them with other data. And I'll get into that shortly. So beach report grading. Fortunately, in Connecticut and New York, both states at our beaches are following the same criteria for pathogen indicator bacteria. So, a health department employee will be out taking a sample. It gets processed at a lab. If the sample result comes back over 104 mpn per 100 milliliters for enterococcus or enterococci, then that beach will typically either be closed. So if you go to the beach and it has it closed due to high bacteria levels, it's because of this specific sampling. Or sometimes an advisory is issued where it's kind of a swim at your own risk. There's high bacteria that's been present in the water. That bacteria is a really good indicator, by the way, of the pathogens that can make us sick. So think about it this way. Water bottles are filled, they're processed at labs for this pathogen indicator bacteria. It lets us know how healthy the waters are for us to swim in them. It wouldn't be realistic for health departments to collect and try to process samples for the whole host of pathogens in the water that can make us sick, right? Think about it that way, testing for giardia or hepatitis or things that, pink eye, you name it, things that can give us rashes. It wouldn't be feasible. So this grouping of bacteria is scientifically proven to represent and be very closely associated with all the pathogens that could be in the water that make people sick. And we're mostly with when this bacteria is coming from warm-blooded animals like us, like humans, right? But keep in mind, it also is in dog poop. It's any warm-blooded animal, geese or some other culprits that can cause elevated levels of these pathogen indicator bacteria. So we need the health department data for the beach grades, and we also need precipitation data, and we want very hyper-local precipitation data. And early on, we have found that that's not very easy to obtain. Airports tend to have really good records of precipitation, but it's not really great to be using LaGuardia for a beach all the way out on the North Fork of Long Island, right? Or New Haven Airport for something out in Wickety-Quock or near Stonington, going east. So we early on decided, we as the project team, not just Save the Sound, but science advisors too, decided we were going to use modeled precipitation data to mix with the bacteria data to fuel these beach grades. And we use an IBM data on demand model and we look at, and you're looking at a map that's showing all the yellow dots are the actual beaches, and then the blue dots represent the boundaries of a simplified Long Island Sound watershed. So we take modeling data specific to the beaches for 48 hours prior to when a sample's taken. And then for the seasonal average that I was showing earlier on, we use this green watershed and calculate the average rainfall that fell within that watershed in the recreational season. And that precipitation data is really important. I think it was David Seegerman that coined this on our team, but when it rains, it's poor. Literally, water quality typically goes down, it becomes poor after heavy rainstorms in many areas in Long Island Sound. So it's important to get a reading on precipitation with the bacteria data. And we want to make that uh, distinction. So for us, a wet weather sample, that means a sample is collected. If it rained over a quarter of an inch within 48 hours of that sample being collected from a local health department, we, Save a Sound, designate that as a wet weather sample. We had less than a quarter inch of rain 48 hours prior to a sample, it's a dry weather sample. And that's a really important distinction, like I said, to make. Precipitation, stormwater really can degrade water quality, and it can also be a bummer. You know, it could be fun to be out in the rain, but not like this person that's about to just catch a whole tidal wave of a New York City taxi puddle. But rainwater really does have a way of bringing down water quality. And so behind those greens and reds, taking it one more step, we issue four different components that go together for the singular beach grade. So we look at the percentage of samples at each beach that failed that safe swimming criterion during dry weather. We look at the frequency of samples failing during wet weather, and those are percentages. We look at the highest concentration of the bacteria during a dry weather sample and the highest concentration of the bacteria during a wet weather sample. And we take those four components to issue the singular beach grade that people see on the map. But anyone can always dive in deeper and see these four components either in an older beach report that was put out as a PDF or print, or on Sound Health Explorer when you click in to a beach of interest. All right, so that's how the grades are formed. You now know what goes into that sausage. So, Sound beaches, overall, really great news. 77% of the 192 public and private Long Island Sound beaches around Long Island Sound received an A or a B. Those are 2025, so that's for last season, right? But that's great news. I grew up on the Sound. Many of you likely grew up on the Sound. Uh, Long Island Sound is a much cleaner place than it was 40 years ago, and I think it's really important to give the good news. Trust me, I have some challenging news that's coming for you. But this was a main headline for us, and we issued it 77% A or B. But of course, if you're doing the math, that's about a quarter of beaches that got under a B grade. And those are the beaches, especially when it's multiple years of below a B, like a C, D, or F, that need some attention. They have some challenges. And those challenges they can come from numerous places, but I'm going to go over four. I've already talked a bit about stormwater. Stormwater carries pollutants to local waterways and beaches. No questions asked about that. It does. Especially in an urbanized area. Long Island Sound is called the urban sea. There's a lot of development about this beautiful estuary we all share. When it rains, polluted stormwater makes its way into rivers and streams and down to Long Island Sound and down to our beaches. Climate change has been really increasing the frequency of high intensity storms, which has also presented a growing challenge for Long Island Sound beaches. And one of the ways to address that, well, climate change is a big issue. There's many ways that we can all try to address climate change. But one of the ways to address the stormwater issue specifically is to not let all that water just run into storm drains like this, the one on the slide, and then shooting out pipes like the one in the other picture at the beach. That's a problem, right? Ideally, that stormwater can be infiltrated into the ground where natural processes can treat it while it's in the groundwater and slowly make its way to rivers and streams and our beaches. And that's much, much better for Long Island Sound water quality as a whole. This is an interesting example. The green pipe that you can see a little bit of it, that's called a stormwater outfall. That's where stormwater discharges when it's collected in a stormwater system. So this particular stormwater outfall is at Anchor Beach 1. So maybe I'll give you a little homework. Don't do it right now while I'm talking. But after this webinar, you can go and look at Anchor Beach 1 in Milford. And you could take a look at the beach and how it does. And honestly, it doesn't have very poor grades. But interestingly, if you look at Anchor Beach 2, which is literally right around this beautiful rock outcropping that we're kind of getting a look at, that particular beach tends to be about one grade up, one grade better than Anchor Beach 1. And guess what? It doesn't have a big green stormwater outfall jutting out right where people are swimming. So we brought this to the attention to the Milford Department of Public Works, and anything that can be done, and we'll stay in those discussions, anything that can be done to reduce the volume of water that comes out of this pipe is going to help Anchor Beach 1's grade get a little bit better. All right, another challenge, on-site systems. This is a big challenge. So septic and cesspools. This is a particularly large challenge for Long Island. There's hundreds of thousands of cesspools and septic tanks on Long Island, but we have them in Connecticut and Westchester too, and some portions of New York City, not so much in the Sound watershed. But septic tanks and cesspools, especially when they're not maintained properly, pumped out, and maintained according to how they need to be maintained to operate properly, bring a big load of pollution, wastewater pollution, to our waterways. And when they're outdated and just not functioning, like I said, properly, they really are a challenge to water quality. And the best thing to do there is we're always stay on top of maintenance and pumping them out as they need to be, depending on the size of the tank or the system, it really varies, but making sure that you're on top of staying on top of, excuse me, I'm just muting my phone, staying on top of pumping them out, really important. And then in some cases, replacing them altogether with new, innovative, alternative systems. This is a big thing that's happening now on Long Island that Save the Sound has certainly been involved in. On Long Island, there are funds available from New York to replace aging, old cesspools in the Long Island Sound watershed, and residents and others, property owners, can apply to receive pretty significant chunks of funds to replace their old cesspools. And that's going to go a long way to improving water quality. Then we have sanitary sewage in a more traditional sense, I suppose, when you get close to the shoreline and other parts of the sound. Those are the pipes that are underground carrying, when we flush our toilets, run our showers, run our sinks, they carry wastewater to wastewater treatment plants. It's really important that that wastewater makes it to the wastewater treatment plant and also gets treated properly before it is, in many cases, discharged into Long Island Sound as treated effluent. So when sewer systems start to degrade, and they are out of sight, out of mind, when those pipes start to degrade underground, they can leak sanitary sewage, raw sewage, into the groundwater, sometimes right into storm systems that aren't designed to carry the sanitary sewer water, obviously. And that untreated sewage makes its way into the Sound and its tributaries, and that's going to impact beach grades. Sometimes after heavy rain events, this video you kind of have to go like this for, but after heavy rain events, our sanitary sewer systems can get overburdened, which is not okay, and start discharging raw sewage like this. That's called a sanitary sewer overflow, where this was in Westchester on Blind Brook. The system is so old and it's letting in so much water that's not supposed to get into it. It literally starts shooting out of pressure points. And we've been involved to help fix that in different ways in Westchester you can look up. And then in New York City and parts of Connecticut, large areas like Bridgeport, Norwalk, New Haven, Hartford, there's combined sewer systems where combined rainwater and untreated sewage mixed together in the same pipes underground. And after certain thresholds of rain, discharge, permitted, but do discharge raw sewage into our local waters. Obviously, and I'm going to show an example of that, that's a problem when it comes to pathogen indicator bacteria and sewage in the water. Last but certainly not least, animal waste. So we collectively as a community often get hung up on, well, we don't want to swim in human waste. Absolutely not, right? All the examples that I was just showing tend to, except for stormwater, are related to human waste making its way into the water and getting picked up as pathogen indicator bacteria in samples. But dogs, geese, rats, raccoons, deer, warm-blooded animals, wildlife, their poop also has pathogen indicator bacteria and can also be associated with pathogens that make people sick. So it's really important that we keep an eye on that. Like geese, for example, look at these cute geese, right? And that tis the season to see all these little goslings running around. But when you're at your park or your local beach and you're walking through Sherwood Island, for example, has a real problem with this in Connecticut, walking through these big, chunky green cigar poops that they leave around, that is a problem for water quality. It's a known issue, and it's important to manage geese. Realistically, we're on June. Geese are migratory birds. They've decided to stay here by choice. They're not following the rest of the flock. They're staying in these areas, which tend to be near beaches, because there's food, climate's changed. It's great, safe, but it's important to keep them away from swimming areas and places where people are interacting because they can become a nuisance and their poop specifically can really degrade water quality. Right. So I want to give some regional examples. First, looking at Connecticut beaches, and I couldn't help myself. I slipped a picture in of my son and his friend playing on Friday. Most of these pictures are we're in May still, so maybe some of you are really brave. I've kind of stopped jumping in the water in May for long swims. I tend to go in June, July now when it gets a little warmer. But this is my little buddy and his friend running around at our beach in Connecticut that we love to go to, Todd's Point. And so Connecticut did great. 76% of the 72 public and private beaches received an A or B. That's pretty much in line, right, with that sound statistic that I gave you earlier. So that's really good news. Um, you know, One example that I want to show is Johnson's Beach in Branford. It got a B. Why am I showing you a B, right? I mean, and that's good news. If you were to go back on the slider to some of the previous years to this beach, you would see C's and some C minuses. It had its challenges and it's been improving, which is great. So I want to show a case example. So the solutions, and this is Johnson's Beach, also called Clark Ave Beach. Um, it's a great little beach in Brantford. It's heavily used, and it was a little mystifying. Where is that pathogen indicator bacteria? Where is that pollution coming from? Immediately, people had jumped to conclusions that would make sense. There are some holding tanks, some septic type systems that are around. Maybe those were leaking. There's some sanitary sewer lines near the beach. Maybe they were leaking. Kind of a more traditional approach to trying to improve water quality. But the community got together, and we partner with a great group called Farms of Friends, the Friends of the Farm River Estuary in Brantford, but also the mayor, the first selectman, and then lots of other community members and civic associations got together, and they did molecular source tracking with the local health district, collecting samples, and they identified that actually the big culprit, and I love dogs, don't get me wrong, we're not going to villainize dogs today, nor did they. The big culprit for the bacteria getting to the beach was dogs. So dog owners, we can do a little bit of villainizing of dog owners, need to be picking up their dog's poop and disposing of it properly. And what was happening, dog poop was being pushed into storm drains, or maybe those bags were being hucked into storm drains or just left out. And when it rained, that dog poop made its way to the beach through local little drainage systems, and was creating an issue. So the community at large did this big behavioral campaign, and they really, it was fun too. There's like pictures of parades with the dogs, marching down the street on, let's stop the poop, making its way to the beach, and informing residents of the local area, you really need to start staying on top of your dog poop and throwing it away. They put these snap lidded trash cans out that were specific for dog poop because, I mean, this is kind of gross, but the reality is if you go to your local park and it's filled up with dog poop bags, it happens at my local park, and then it rains, the trash can fills up with water, right? And you get like I didn't coin this term, but like a dog poop tea that then oozes out of that trash can and off into surrounding waters. Really gross. But if you have these snap top trash cans, it can limit how that's happening. So this is something to recommend. If you don't have this at your local park, recommend your municipality gets on top of it. And we had a great webinar. If people are interested in looking into this more, we hosted a webinar with the groups involved. I think David Siegerman will drop it in the chat right now. Check it out. It's a recording and it's really interesting. All right, going to Westchester because I know we have people from all around the Sound on this webinar. I wanted to hit the major regions. 47% of the 19 public beaches and private beaches received an A or a B. This picture was taken at Glen Island Park, which tends to get a really good grade. It's in New Rochelle. It's a beautiful beach. Um, an interesting beach also is Oakland Beach or Rytown Park, a public beach that's used by a lot of residents in the area. Received a B minus in 2025, which isn't too bad. But if you go back, you'll see it had some C's and lower grades that popped up. We've been in touch with the Rye Town administration and the director of the Rye Town Park to kind of discuss, what do you think is what's causing this grade? What could be put in place to kind of help solve the issue? And it's a beautiful beach. I have a buddy of mine does open water swimming from this beach, so I talk to him a lot. There's a big group of people that go out and they take long swims off Oakland Beach early in the morning. But here it is with a bunch of beachgoers hanging out on it. It's a beautiful beach, but you don't want to have these high hits of bacteria. And through those discussions, there was already a little bit of local knowledge on it. We went out and we saw this during a rainy day. I think it was actually with David Siegerman, right? David, you were putting the comms hat away and joining us as an environmental scientist. We went out and we saw this water bubbling up right in the swimming beach. And like from everything I've told you today, you probably know that probably isn't helping water quality, right? So that water, fortunately, is not a broken sanitary sewer line just kind of oozing up at the beach. Turns out that that's a designated outfall location for this pond. And if you know Rytown Park, this beautiful man-made pond was put in to help address stormwater and to create habitat. But the thing is, with those really intense rainstorms that we've been getting and the way precipitation patterns have changed, the engineering for this hasn't quite worked out. So yeah, it's there and it's a great resource, but it's also loaded with waterfowl. Remember that thing I said earlier about their poop also causing beach water quality issues and stormwater by design, but it's overtopping through this little section in the foreground of the picture, and it's coming out to the beach at this outfall. And that's a problem. It wasn't supposed to be built as a issue for water quality. It was built to help. And this is the kind of nature-based solution that we want to see more and more of, really. But Rytown is now evaluating how to direct some of the stormwater away from this pond, which is a beneficial pond overall, but to get some of the stormwater away so we can avoid the water shooting up like I just showed you at the beach. They have grants in to help do that, and we've written letters of support and are fully supportive of their efforts. Um, Even after they do that, though, I brought to their attention that the city of Rye, so that's Rye Town, if you're familiar with Westchester, that's different than the city of Rye. The city of Rye has a very large stormwater pipe that runs down Dearborn Ave and discharges right next to this beach, which is in the picture. So heavy rainstorms, that's also bringing a really big slug of polluted stormwater. It's going to be important to address the pond issue, but without trying to address this stormwater coming from this pipe, we'll likely continue to see high hits of bacteria at that beach, especially in and around precipitation days. All right, down in New York City, where at least one baseball team is doing really well this year. 27% of the 11, yep, that's right. That's my team too. 27% of the 11 public and private beaches are receiving an A or B grade. So it's lower. This picture is from Orchard Beach. Awesome beach in the Bronx. Really cool success story. When you go back, yeah, look at, I see that mug, Siegerman. Going back to 20, 30, 40 years ago, people weren't really utilizing this beach that much. It was seen as kind of a dirty beach, and lots of other issues, probably besides pathogen indicator bacteria, were happening. But Orchard Beach actually gets a really good grade now, and we're going to see it in a second. It's one of the beaches that receives B's and even A's sometimes, and great resource for public beach and resource for the community. But zooming in, and Orchard Beach is in the top right corner. You see it as that light green circle. Zooming in a bit, you could see there's a string of D's and F's. There's the easternmost Queens Beach, Douglas Manor Association Beach in the lower right-hand corner, and then a string of F's and D's in Eastchester Bay on the west side of Eastchester Bay. And then another one down, getting a little bit closer to Queens, kind of in between Flushing and Little Neck Bay, another D. And you know what? New York City, greatest city in the world, right? I love New York City. But it's so developed. I mean, that's obvious, right? So the amount of impervious surfaces in New York City and Queens and the Bronx, the hardened surfaces, you can just see it here, right? The gray. It's just roads, roofs, parking lots, you name it. When stormwater hits those surfaces, it rapidly flushes off into our local waters and creates problems. Add to that that New York City has a very old sewer system developed before there were wastewater treatment plants, back when they were just trying to get waste away from people, right? In ages of like cholera and typhoid fever, get waste away from people to local waters was a goal. But now we know that you have to do more than that for healthy waters and to keep waters like safe. So New York City has by far the largest combined sewer system in Long Island Sound. So again, that's where stormwater and wastewater combine by design and mix, and after certain amounts of rain, discharge out of locations that have activated on Sound Health Explorer. The brown circles here are combined sewer outflows or outfalls, where after a certain level of rain, raw sewage and stormwater is coming out of those locations pretty hot, pretty fast. If you've seen one, it's really gross. And New York City is working on it through their long-term control plans, which they have to do. And do look that up and look up our involvement on it too. But I would say anybody that is interested in Queens and Bronx and Long Island Sound water quality, start commenting on those long-term control plans. Join a group like Save the Sound. We can help get information to people that want to advocate for cleaner water. It goes a long way. So these CSOs, that's the acronym, are a serious problem to water quality, a known problem to water quality. And of course, you see those Fs and Ds, they're very close to those combined sewer overflows, outfalls. But you look at Orchard Beach and there's a brown dot really close to it. I just want to point out that that's a smaller CSO outfall location, and it goes into Hunter Island Bay. It doesn't discharge at the actual beach. And Hunter Island Bay goes all the way up towards New Rochelle before it kind of comes back out into the Sound. But these other ones that are down closer to the beaches on the southwest are much larger pipes, and they discharge a lot larger volume of CSO contaminated water prior to discharging. So it's not really a surprise when we see these D's or F's, but we, Save the Sound, and you all should want to get involved, right? So do make your voice heard and get involved. This is Manhattan Beach Club. You can see 60% of samples failed after wet weather. Not a surprise. Lots of samples also, unfortunately, sampled during dry weather also had high hits of bacteria. Also, equally not that big of a surprise. And this is what one of those CSOs looks like. If you're boating or you're out on the Sound, this one's on the lower portion of the Hutchinson River, which goes right into Eastchester Bay. This is a New York City combined sewer outfall location. So just imagine that after a big rainstorm, just dumping raw sewage and rainwater out. It happens. It's better than it gurgling up, near someone's home, but it's something that needs work. And this isn't a light switch type issue. The investments to reduce volumes at CSO locations are tremendous. But it's important to find that balance and to continue to advocate for cleaner water and CSO reductions. I put this image, there's a green sign above the outfall. You can kind of see it behind the tree. If you're ever wondering and you're at one of these locations, is that a combined sewer outfall? New York City and anywhere, it doesn't have to just be New York City, are required to put signs by these to let people know this is a CSO discharge location. Stay away after wet weather. Doesn't always work, though. Unfortunately, I've seen people out and about fishing and doing things here, and they don't know, right? Okay, last but not least, I was making kind of a little tour around the Sound. We're going to go back out along the North Shore of Long Island. 90% of the 90 beaches received an A or B. That's great. Long Island had a very good year. It's not always quite as good, but they did have a good year. It was also a drier year. Maybe those beaches were a little more linked in with the drier conditions. This is Sunken Meadow. I want to call this beach out though. Crescent Beach in Nassau had been closed for something like 17 years. And again, go to Sound Health Explorer, check it out yourself on that sliding bar. If you go back just a few years, you're going to see D's, C minuses, poor grades, lots of sampling by Nassau County Department of Health. a lot of poor grades. And I'm not taking any credit for this at Save the Sound. I'm just showing how Sound Health Explorer and the beach grades can help people see, progress and such. But here's the beach just going back to 2021. It had a D, and you could go back even further. It looks like the kind of beach that you would think, well, it probably has a good grade. There's not a lot of development around it. Um, but there definitely were issues with pathogen indicator bacteria. And there were a couple sources that were identified. Coalition to Save Hempstead Harbor, one of our close partners in Hempstead Harbor, the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee, a municipal kind of conglomerate, also mixed in with NGOs, and lots of elected officials in the health department all work together to take more and more samples. You can see NASA took 174 samples. That's a lot in 2021 at this beach to kind of help figure out when and why. But it was the additional work the Coalition to Save Hempstead Harbor and the other people I mentioned, other groups I mentioned, took on that really helped open this beach up. And the beach is open in 2026. Go check it out. It's a really good success story. It was opened because of a few things. One, very significant investments, and a lot of it through state funds, in the watershed to one, upsize a culvert that a creek would flow down into near this beach. So a creek comes through, round structure near the beach, and the structure was a bit of a pinch point, which was letting the water in the creek get stagnant, which often will lead to higher counts of bacteria. So by upsizing that culvert, it helps in so many other ways besides pathogen indicator bacteria. That was one notch in improving water quality. There was some cesspool septic analysis that happened and some upgrades of septic systems. There was a lot of riparian plantings of native plants that went in as well, which is great for water quality. But then there was also a microbial source tracking effort. Similar to Johnson's Beach. Remember, I showed Johnson's Beach with the dog poop being identified? In this case, though, it was bird poop. And it was coming from two fairly large ponds on private property that flowed into the creek that then went down to the beach. And those kind of discharges from the ponds had filters put in place that helped treat the water. And so the combination of those actions, one of which fully fueled by wouldn't have been known much about without that MST DNA sampling, identifying birds as one of the issues, led to this beach being open. And what a success story. It was like 17 years it had been closed or something like that. And, kudos to them. Maybe we should go check it out. Crescent Beach out in Nassau if you're up in the area. So what can you all do? Wrapping up, here are some things you could do. Go to the beach report, please, and take a look at this. I won't read them all out. A couple things that I talked about today, though, green infrastructure, things like rain gardens, bioswales, those barrels that can collect rainwater from our roofs, and then we can use them to maybe water our planting areas. Anything to slow down stormwater before it makes its way to tributaries in Long Island Sound goes a long way. Advocating for your municipality to do large scale green infrastructure projects on municipal properties can be really beneficial too. Kind of like that Rytown Park example I showed you. Um, Maintaining sewers, whether they be private or the municipal lines outside of our homes, really important. Also septics and cesspools. And I would say get involved. Have your voice be heard. Share your beach grades. If you're unhappy about the grades that you're seeing, you could reach out to us. I'm more than happy to help, interpret kind of the behind the scenes on the beach grades. But let people know. And it doesn't have to be a hostile discussion, but talk to your elected officials, talk to the Department of Public Works and the health department where you live, and ask those very important questions. What's being done to improve water quality at our beach? Or it might be what's being done to protect the water quality at this really valued community resource beach that we have. It doesn't always have to be something in need of a fix. Sometimes things need protecting. But stay informed, get involved, pick up the beach report, please use it as an advocacy tool in ways that you all, quite literally, can get involved for a cleaner sound. All right, so if you had questions or comments, now is going to be a good time to take them. You're also welcome to email us, our team at pollution@savethesound.org. That goes to a few of us. Stay informed, savethesound.org, take action, get on our mailing list. You can get more information about beach grades, but many other things related to water quality and the sound. And I thought what might be kind of interesting too, I'm happy to take traditional questions. I was going to open up Sound Health Explorer. In fact, I already have it open. And if anyone wants to call out a particular beach, I'm more than happy to take a look at it, kind of to help also show how to navigate soundhealthexplorer.org.
Peter, we do have a couple dating back to the very beginning of the
Okay.
webinar. So I'm just going to read you this question from Germana about Iron Pier Beach on Long Island.
Iron Pier
Um,
Beach.
the question is, I'm concerned about the warm water running out of a large tube or channel directly into the Long Island Sound at Iron Pier Beach. Kids love to swim in that warm water. I wonder if is it safe or should they avoid it? But you could dive into Iron Pier Beach and I'll tee up another one for you after.
That's a great question. So here's Iron Pier Beach. You could see I used the search, took me right to the beach. I didn't know exactly where that one was. And I see this kind of lagoon pond and some maybe agricultural, or it's hard to tell exactly what that is. That might even be, well, you could let me know, whoever asked that question, but there's some interesting development around it. I would say the beach obviously is getting a decent grade here. We look at a B, and if we just kind of go back, it's gotten an A, B. So in terms of C in 2022, in terms of pathogen indicator bacteria, and again, you always need to follow I don't know if I mentioned this, but you should always follow your local health department. I think this is Suffolk, local health department guidance um, for any given day to protect, yourself and your families and friends. But going into the beach, um, in terms of pathogens, it doesn't look too bad. But you know what? You bring up a good point. There could be other things going on in that lagoon, harmful algal blooms. There could be some other types of contaminants. I would think if you're concerned about it, which it sounds like you're interested at the very least, I would reach out to the Suffolk County Department of Health, ask them to take a look at what's coming out of that outlet, which I trust is coming from here straight towards this beach, and see, if there's anything that can be characterized or sampled on top of the pathogens to make sure that that beach is in fact supporting safe swimming. And that's a great question. And in an enclosed body of water like that, one thing that immediately comes to my mind would be harmful algal blooms, which can be associated with warm water and maybe excess, not to say it's happening, but excess nitrogen from like fertilizer and other sources may be causing an algal bloom issue, which can be associated with human risk if we interact with it, and pets too. I think you all might know that, but pets interacting with that water, dogs and others can get sick. Just taking the opportunity because you called this beach out, though. I clicked on it. I'm going through it. There's other information that can be obtained on the left here, and this is how that slide works. You go down the line, and you could dive into the data, meaning you can quite literally download the data, and I'll show you that. You could go in, hey, I want all the data from 2003 to 2025, or maybe you just want 1 year. You could filter. You could also take a quick look at the sample results here and scroll through with the precipitation. And there's other things you could do, charts, and then here's the summary. So that's how you kind of take that next step with Sound Health Explorer and get into the details of your beach. What else you got, David?
Yeah, Peter, and anybody who wants to throw a particular beach into the chat, we'll try and get to that one. But here's one William had asked if we could cover City Island and Orchard Beach. You did talk a bit about Orchard Beach, but you talked, if you looked back historically, what you might see. Maybe you could take a dive there, and then I have a couple more questions for you.
Yep. Even all the way back to 2004. We've looked at this before. You have a couple blips that come up. This area is called the Bronx Riviera too. It's really pretty. I go there. We keep a Save the Sound boat on City Island at one of the marinas. One of our water quality boats is there, so I go to City Island a lot. So is my team. I like it so much. I've started taking my own family down there on our family boat because I like to hang out there and just walk around. It's a great community. Um, but I was looking back at like a 40-year back look, which we don't have here on Sound Health Explorer for Orchard Beach and the beaches at City Island even. So really all these greens that you're seeing are a testament to like the phenomenal work that's been happening in the area. I would say the more troubling and concerning portion of Eastchester Bay down there when it comes to beaches is going to be southwest Eastchester Bay, getting towards the Throgs Neck Bridge, specifically with those CSOs and larger volumes, more development happening in the area over the years, really can lead to an issue. So I know City Island Oyster Reef, who William works a lot with, Captain Mike, the Hutchinson River Restoration Group, Save the Sound, and others are very active in commenting on the long-term control plans that New York City DEP is working on and getting, needing to implement to improve water quality in New York City. I see it after working on Long Island Sound water quality for quite some time as a really important area to focus on. The EPA knows it. Lots of NGOs and government organizations know it. The Western Sound is still very challenged, and it's going to take significant efforts to have it continue to improve the same way that the rest of the Sound has. Yeah, David.
Yeah, just I'm glad you mentioned the Western Sound because Mindy had a question. Basically, can you provide trend data? And probably couldn't do it at this moment necessarily, but can you provide trend data for the Western Sound beaches over the last 5, 10 years and identify which municipalities are receiving targeted outreach or technical assistance to address recurring bacteria exceedances like you did with the Milford DPW?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I joke around. I call them my beach love letters to the municipalities before the beach grades come out. I don't know if they love seeing them, but any beach that's getting a D or an F gets a communication from us, offer to sit down and talk about that grade in advance of our press release going out, because I also don't want them to be blindsided. I respect what elected officials do greatly, and I don't want them to get hit by a reporter the day of the press release. So they're given advance notice. And often I'll also reference, this has been going on for this many years. And we're fairly persistent. We can't be everywhere all the time, but we're pretty persistent in following up, especially on some of those more problematic beaches. Challenged beaches, I should say, to engage in conversations with them to help them understand the beach grades. I have one just coming up, for example, in 2 days to talk about Byram Beach in Greenwich, where I live. And it's a known challenged area, but to help even further understand the beach grades and offer up some MST work, by the way. Save a Sound built in microbial source tracking in our lab here in Larchmont, the DNA sampling I was talking about. We'll be taking some samples at Byram Beach and amongst other places this summer to help characterize where literally the biological source of the bacteria are coming from. So I hope that answers the one part of your question. We do reach out to the beaches that are not performing above a C. And then trend analyses, it's tricky with beach and this type of data. There's a lot of interannual variability that can make it a bit challenging. But we do, now that we have, 2 decades of data at some of these beaches, do plan on running probably non-parametric statistical tests on these data to show trending information. This particular type of pollution, not always the solution, but this particular type of pollution, though, like I just showed in Crescent Beach, once you target and fix the issues, sometimes the investment's much larger than other times, you can have really rapid changes and results. A little bit different than eutrophication and excess nitrogen in Long Island Sound, which is another big issue. Sometimes ratcheting down on nitrogen specifically, we won't see an ecosystem rebound for 10, 20 years. But in terms of pathogen indicator bacteria, the right investments in the right place can lead to pretty rapid improvements at that particular beach.
And Peter, you just teed this one up perfectly. Also, another question from Mindy, who had asked about our lab and whether we have MST capabilities. And the follow-up to that was, if so, have you considered using this technology to conduct a deeper investigation in areas with chronically poor beach grades?
Yes, absolutely. That was part of the reason we developed it. That type of sampling can be really costly when using kind of out of the area private labs, and we've used them too. But part of the reason we developed the technology in our lab is we want to see this technology widely used across the whole Sound at beaches and hotspots of bacteria and rivers. And we've been in touch with many groups like Save the Sound, for example, that are interested in adding on to their pathogen indicator bacteria monitoring, this MST work. We have grant applications in with municipalities to do really high frequency sampling. And then, like I just said, Environworks just going to take a few grabs as well, because it's been this long standing issue to help characterize the biological source of this pollution. Really, really valuable. That was made possible by the Long Island Sound Funders Collaborative, the New York Community Trust. It was a big investment in our lab, and we're very grateful for their support in bringing that instrumentation to the lab. And we let them know early on that part of the reason we're doing this is to share. It's not just kind of Save the Sound in-house thing. We want to share that resource and ability to do that type of sampling with the sound community as a whole.
Peter, there's another community that I think you've had some contact with, which is a question here from Norma Lee. Do you know if West Haven is working on improvements for their grades, which have been a bit poor? West Haven has the longest stretch of public beach in Connecticut.
I do. Yeah, we've been in touch with Mayor Borer, Dorinda, and their health department in West Haven. And they're taking a very proactive role in looking at the biological sources of pollution. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some MST results from them as early as next season. And we are definitely in discussion with the municipality of West Haven and appreciate where they're going with tracking down the bacteria that are causing some issues at their beaches.
Okay, we don't have any other questions about particular beaches. There was one that I'm scrolling back to find. Yeah, this is from Saskia, who asked, "What is the community science water quality sampling data used for?" And that's the uses the same safe swimming criteria as the beach grades do.
Yeah, it does. So we have a community science program. We're 66 locations in Greenwich, Westchester, out in Queens as well. You're wondering why we're not doing the Bronx. It's because there's the Bronx River Alliance that's very actively monitoring the Bronx. There's no point in duplicating efforts. And there's other groups that are out doing that type of data collection as well. And we use them in similar ways. But those tend to not be at swimming beaches. They're often in the rivers and streams and other portions of the shoreline. We do have some swimming beaches involved. But of the 66 locations, many of which are in tributaries, streams, rivers, I'm speaking for Save the Sound's perspective, where we're in Blind Brook or we're in Beaver Swamp Brook or the Mamaroneck River, Gabbler's Creek in Queens, taking samples and taking a look at the pathogen indicator bacteria that's flowing into the sound, not necessarily at a beach, and then sharing those data with municipalities as well, identifying hotspots where bacteria are more prevalent, trying to do our own inspections, but also sharing with the health department and other places to look for sources that can be curbed. And we will be applying the MST technology I talked about, in addition to collaborations with other groups internally at those 66 locations, specifically a subset of them where we know after 10 years plus of sampling, there are hotspots. And we haven't, and others haven't been able to identify the actual source. The physical pipe maybe, but we're going to be figuring out the biological source, which will really assist in working to curb the pollution at those local spots. So those are data that we collect literally. We have trained community scientists and staff out collecting samples, processing them at the lab. And again, the beach grades are the health department data.
And that starts up that starts up 2 weeks from yesterday,
Two
right?
weeks.
Start.
Yeah. And if you're interested in that, pollution at savethesound.org. Our environmental analysts just started leading trainings. We train all our volunteers annually, and we have trainings coming up. So if you're interested, get on it. And again, Greenwich, Westchester are these are the locations. People are welcome to come from wherever, but that's where we're sampling. Greenwich, Westchester, and then Queens and a little bit of Nassau as well.
So we have no other questions about particular beaches. I think we covered most of the questions that were in the chat. We should probably tell everybody that everybody who registered for today's webinar will receive a link to the recording of this, and they should feel free to share this out far and wide. But other than that, Peter, I think you could land the plane now.
Okay, good. Well, I
I'll
really
just I'll just
appreciate.
sit here with this Mets mug and
Yeah,
make you
yeah,
feel
yeah.
guilty about what you
We're not
said beyond
anti-Mets in
category.
this office. In fact, we have a lot of sympathy for David Seagerman, but it is a Bronx Bombers office for the most part, and he knows it. So that's all right, David. There's always next year. So thank you everyone for coming out. Again, just really consider us a resource. You know, we're doing what we can with outreach with these data, but we really do want people to pick these up and advocate locally with them as well. You know, we can be many places, but not everywhere at once. And thank you for being here, just wanting to know more about sound water quality as a whole. We really appreciate it. And happy swimming season. Get out there and go swimming.